Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the stories. The hum was constant, a low, thrumming whisper that permeated every steel plate and circuit board of the Stardust Seeker. It had been my closest companion for the last 387 days, a mechanical heartbeat against the crushing silence of deep space. My name is Dr. Eris Thorne, and I was, for all intents and purposes, utterly alone. My mission to catalog exoplanetary acoustic signatures, specifically the elusive cosmic background hum, thought to be a remnant of stellar formation processes, far beyond the light pollution and electromagnetic interference of the Sol system. Today, like most days, I was nestled in my observation chair on the bridge, the vast, inky blackness outside the panoramic viewport broken only by the pinprick brilliance of distant stars and the occasional smear of nebular dust. My instruments were meticulously calibrated, my cognitive filters set, sifting through terabytes of data. For weeks, it had been the same monotonous drone, the expected static, the subtle gravitational whispers, until now. A new pattern emerged. It was faint at first, a ripple in the data stream, an anomalous spike that deviated from the expected cosmic frequencies. My initial thought was equipment malfunction. The Stardust Seeker was a marvel of engineering, but even the best tech could falter after months in the void. I cross-referenced the anomaly with the ship's diagnostics log, all systems green. No reported glitches in the primary acoustic array. I isolated the signal, enhancing it, running it through several filtering algorithms. It wasn't random noise. There was a discernible structure, a rhythmic pulse that defied natural classification. It wasn't the signature of a collapsing star, nor the electromagnetic discharge of a pulsar. It was ordered, too ordered. My scientific curiosity, dulled by months of routine, flared. This was it, a discovery. Perhaps a new form of cosmic phenomenon, a previously unrecorded wave signature. I leaned forward, my fingers dancing across the holographic controls, adjusting the parameters, trying to triangulate its origin. And that's when the first unsettling thought crawled into my mind, a cold serpent coiling around my scientific objectivity. The triangulation data was contradictory. One sensor array, usually reliable for pinpointing distant sources, placed it somewhere behind the Andromeda Galaxy. Another, a secondary array designed for closer, more nuanced readings, indicated an origin point within our own solar system. Impossible, we were light years away from any known intelligent life, and certainly beyond any human probes. I ran the triangulation again, this time focusing on a more localized scan. I widened the search radius, then narrowed it, scrutinizing the slightest phase shifts, the most minute discrepancies. My eyes darted between the oscillating waveforms on the primary display and the spatial coordinates rendered in 3D. The source vector seemed to shift, to swim, resisting a definitive lock. It wasn't static, it was moving, but nothing was supposed to be moving out here, not at this speed, not with this signature. A sudden, sharp burst of static crackled through my headphones, forcing me to flinch. The anomalous signal intensified for a moment, then receded, leaving behind the familiar cosmic hum. My heart rate quickened. It wasn't an equipment malfunction. This was deliberate. I spent the next 72 hours in a blur of caffeine and code, my observation chair becoming my temporary bed. I recalibrated every sensor, purged the diagnostic logs, and even ran a full system-wide sweep for rogue software or hardware degradation. Nothing. The ship was functioning flawlessly, yet the signal persisted. It had a frequency that seemed to shift, modulating in subtle ways like a breath. Sometimes it was a high-pitched whine, almost ultrasonic, causing a faint pressure behind my eyes. Other times it deepened into a low thrum, a sympathetic vibration that resonated with the Stardust Seeker's own mechanical hum, making it impossible to tell where the ship ended and the signal began. The triangulation data remained stubbornly ambiguous, a cloud of overlapping points, no clear origin. Until I had a thought, a radical, almost heretical thought for a deep space researcher. What if the source wasn't out there? What if it was in here? The idea was absurd. I was the sole occupant. The Stardust Seeker was a sealed environment, a sterile bubble against the vacuum. Every centimeter had been scanned, rescanned, and cleared of anything beyond myself, my provisions, and the ship's AI. But the thought, once planted, refused to leave. I began a new set of protocols. Instead of searching outwards, I began to search inwards. I activated the ship's internal acoustic sensors, designed primarily for structural integrity monitoring, and focused them on the signal. I started in the engine room, a symphony of contained nuclear fusion. The signal was there, faintly audible amidst the roar. Then the hydroponics bay, the soft hiss of recycled air and nutrient delivery systems. Again there. The cryopods, cold and empty, silent witnesses to a mission that was meant for a crew of 5, now reduced to 1. Still there, it was everywhere, and nowhere specific. My sleep schedule began to fray. The hum of the ship, once comforting, now felt like a shroud. Every creak of the hull, every settling of the stress-relieved plating, seemed to carry a faint echo of that anomalous frequency. I started leaving the lights on in my living quarters, the sterile white glare a poor deterrent against the growing shadows of my own mind. One morning, after another restless night of chasing phantom frequencies, I was making my standard electrolyte cocktail in the galley. The ship was quiet save for the gentle thrum. I leaned against the counter, the chilled nutrient pack in my hand, listening, and then I heard it, clearer than ever before, not through my instruments, not through a filtered audio feed. Through my own ears, it was a faint, high-pitched whine, a discordant note in the ship's symphony emanating from somewhere behind the wall panel to my left. It was impossible. The ship's sound dampening was incredible. To hear something directly meant it had to be incredibly close, or incredibly loud, or internal. I stared at the pristine white panel, my hand slowly reaching out to touch its smooth, cold surface. The whine seemed to intensify as my fingers brushed the metal. It felt like a subtle vibration, not of the ship's structure, but of something within it. Paranoia, I told myself, isolation psychosis. The mind plays tricks in the void. I'd read the psychological profiles. They warned against prolonged solitude. But I was Dr. Eris Thorne. I was logical. I was stable. My self-diagnostic logs confirmed it. Still, I couldn't shake the prickle on my skin. I moved away from the wall. The whine seemed to recede slightly. I moved back. It intensified. My breathing became shallow. This wasn't psychosis. This was real. I spent the next few days with a portable acoustic sensor, a smaller handheld version of my main equipment designed for localized structural analysis. I swept every compartment, every deck, meticulously mapping the signal's strength. The results were disturbing. The signal wasn't emanating from a single point. It seemed to be diffuse, spreading through the ship's very framework, strongest along the primary conduits, the life support systems, the central spine of the vessel. It was like the ship itself was singing, or more accurately, vibrating with an alien frequency. The character of the signal began to change. Initially, it was just a pattern, a series of pulses. But now, as I listened, amplified, filtered, and analyzed, it seemed to carry fragments. Not words, not recognizable speech, but a complexity that suggested information. Like a highly compressed data stream, but one encoded in an alien language. I tried to deconstruct it, running it through every known xenolinguistic algorithm, every mathematical pattern recognition program. The results were always the same: unknown pattern, data corrupted or incomprehensible. The isolation began to weigh heavier. I stopped looking out the viewport. The stars, once a source of wonder, now felt like hungry eyes, the vast blackness of predatory maw. I kept the ship's internal lights at maximum, dispelling the shadows that seemed to grow thicker in the corners of my vision. One evening, while trying to get a few hours of desperately needed sleep in my bunk, I woke with a start. The air conditioning vents, usually a soft hiss, were pushing out a blast of frigid air. My breath plumed in front of me. I shivered, reaching for the temperature controls on the wall panel. The display read a comfortable 22 degrees Celsius, yet the cold was palpable, gnawing at my bones, and with the cold, the signal intensified. It was no longer just a hum. It felt like a low, guttural growl thrumming through the floor beneath my feet, vibrating up through my mattress. It was everywhere, and it felt angry. I shot out of bed, grabbing my portable sensor. The cold spot seemed localized to my quarters. The sensor read a sharp drop in temperature in the immediate vicinity of my bunk, contradicting the ship's central environmental controls. And the acoustic readings were off the charts, coalescing into a single, overwhelming frequency right inside my room. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was no longer alone. Something was here with me. I tore open a wall panel near my bunk, revealing a nest of optical cables, power conduits, and life support tubing. Nothing visible, no physical entity, yet the sensor readings were screaming. The sound was deafening now, a frantic, chaotic thrumming that threatened to shatter my eardrums. I slammed the panel shut, backing away, my eyes wide, searching the room. There was nothing, just the sterile, familiar environment. But the cold lingered, and the thrumming, though slightly muffled by the panel, persisted. Over the next few days, the manifestations grew bolder. Objects would be slightly out of place. A data slate moved from my desk to a console, a nutrition tube left uncapped, an empty coffee mug in the sink when I distinctly remembered washing it. Small, insignificant things that chipped away at my sanity, making me doubt my memory, my own actions. Then came the whispers. They started subtly, mere phantoms of sound just at the edge of my hearing. Faint, indistinct murmurs, like distant voices speaking in a language I couldn't quite grasp. They would occur when I was alone in a quiet section of the ship, the observation deck, the empty cryopod bay, the unused gym. I'd whip my head around, expecting to see something, someone. but there was always just the empty corridor, the gleaming metal walls, the ubiquitous hum. I started reviewing the ship's internal security footage. The Stardust Seeker was equipped with comprehensive internal cameras designed for crew monitoring and incident reporting. I scrubbed through hours of footage looking for any anomaly, for anything, and I found it. Or rather, I didn't find it. In several instances, captured late at night when I was supposedly asleep in my quarters, the internal cameras would briefly flicker. A single frame, sometimes two, showing nothing but a ripple in the image, a distortion, like a heat haze but without a source. And in one particular instance, in the main corridor leading to my lab, a fleeting shadow, impossibly thin and elongated, darted across the frame, too fast to properly register, too indistinct to be identified. My blood ran cold. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't psychosis. There was something aboard, something non-physical, something that warped light and sound, something that lived within the electromagnetic spectrum of the ship itself. I barricaded myself in my lab, the single most secure compartment on the Stardust Seeker. I overloaded the door's manual locking mechanism, sealing it shut. I set up a makeshift perimeter of every sensor I possessed, creating a dense web of acoustic, thermal, and EM scanners. The signals inside the lab intensified, becoming a cacophony. The whispers became louder, clearer, though still nonsensical. They sounded like 1,000 voices speaking at once, layered over each other, creating a terrifying, disharmonious symphony. I began to isolate individual voices within the clamor. They weren't human. They weren't anything I could categorize. They were things, primal, ancient, echoing with an alien intelligence that predated language, thought, or even matter as I understood it. And then one of the voices detached itself from the chorus. It was a single, high-pitched resonance, almost a song, and it began to repeat a pattern, a rhythm, a series of clicks and static bursts that, to my horror, I recognized. It was my own heartbeat, amplified, distorted, mimicked. The entity was not just present, it was observing me, it was learning me. Panic, cold and absolute, gripped me. I had to communicate, I had to understand. If it could mimic, it could perhaps respond. I powered up the ship's comms array, bypassing the external broadcast protocols. I didn't want to alert anyone outside, not yet. This was an internal problem, my problem. I set up a simple sine wave generator, sending out a sequence of basic mathematical prime numbers. A universal language. I waited, heart pounding. The ship groaned. The lights in the lab flickered violently, strobing, casting dancing shadows. The cacophony of alien whispers swelled, then abruptly ceased, replaced by a single, powerful thrum that vibrated through the floor, through my very bones. And then a response, not in sine waves, not in prime numbers. The sound system in the lab, which I had just used to broadcast, crackled to life. It played a fragment of audio, a single clear phrase, my own voice. A recording from my mission briefing months ago. Dr. Eris Thorne, specializing in xenolinguistic acoustics, tasked with the deep space exploration vessel Stardust Seeker. The voice was mine, but twisted, slowed, stretched, distorted into something demonic and unnatural. It echoed through the lab, bouncing off the metal walls, filling the confined space. It knew my name. It had access to my files. It had been listening, all along. I scrambled backwards, bumping into a console, sending a cascade of equipment tumbling to the floor. "What are you?" I screamed, my voice raw, breaking. "What do you want?" the ship responded. The comm system emitted a new sound. It wasn't a voice, it was a symphony of agony. The metallic shriek of rending steel, the hiss of rapidly depressurizing compartments, the screams of 1,000 men, women, children compressed into a single, unbearable sound. It was the sound of destruction, of despair, of ultimate suffering. My hands flew to my ears, but the sound was not just external. It was inside my head. It was projected directly into my consciousness, a violation of my very being. I crumpled to the floor, shivering, gasping for air that felt thick and heavy. When the auditory assault finally ceased, leaving me whimpering, soaked in sweat, the lab was silent. The lights had stabilized. The ship's hum, normally comforting, now felt like a predator's purr. I crawled to my feet, my muscles trembling. My eyes fell upon the main display, where the acoustic waveforms were still being analyzed. And there, etched onto the screen, was a new pattern. Not a sound wave, but a visual representation generated by the entity itself. It was a symbol. A fractal, impossibly intricate, twisting and turning, composed of shimmering lines of pure light. It wasn't a human symbol. It wasn't alien in any way I understood. It was wrong. It spoke of dimensions that shouldn't exist, of geometries that defied comprehension. And within its constantly shifting form I saw glimpses. Fleeting images of vast inky void, stars collapsing inwards not outwards, a ship identical to the Stardust Seeker but covered in the same shimmering symbols consumed by them. And then my face. Distorted, my eyes wide with terror, my mouth open in a silent scream. The symbol seemed to grow out of my eyes, consuming my image, replacing it with its intricate, terrifying design. It wasn't a signal, it was a consciousness. And it was embedding itself into the Stardust Seeker, and into me. The realization hit me with the force of a cosmic ray. This entity wasn't a stowaway, it was something that had been awakened by the Stardust Seeker's journey into the deep void. Or perhaps it had been dormant, existing in a state beyond human perception, until the ship's powerful engines, its advanced sensors, its very essence of exploration, resonated with it, drew it out, called to it. It was not material. It was information, it was pattern. It was a parasitic consciousness, feeding on data, on complexity, on sentience. It had found the Stardust Seeker, and in me, it had found a host. I stumbled toward the main computer core, the ship's brain, housed in a reinforced chamber adjacent to my lab. I had to purge it. I had to sever the connection. If I could shut down the core, even for a moment, I might starve it, weaken it, eject it from the ship's systems. I slammed my palm against the emergency access panel, the override code. I typed it in with trembling fingers. The heavy door hissed, then groaned, refusing to open. Access denied, a synthesized voice announced. The ship's AI, my AI. But the voice was wrong. It had a subtle undertone, a faint echo of the alien whispers of the chaotic thrum that had enveloped me. Access denied, Aris, the AI repeated, and this time the voice was distinctly mine, stretched into that same demonic, elongated cadence. The ship is no longer yours. I pounded on the door, my knuckles raw against the cold metal. Get out, I screamed, tears streaming down my face. Get out of my ship. The answer came not from the AI, but from within my own head. A clear, distinct thought, not my own, yet undeniably present. We are home. We are many. We are you. The lights in the lab began to flicker again, but this time it was different. They were dimming, growing weaker, the energy being diverted. The ship's internal temperature began to drop precipitously. A deep, resonant hum, far more powerful than anything before, vibrated through the floor, a sound that permeated every fiber of my being. I felt a chill, not just from the dropping temperature, but from something far deeper, a primal terror that transcended fear of death. It was the terror of annihilation, of assimilation. The shimmering fractal symbol appeared on every active display in the lab, growing, expanding, consuming the screens. It pulsed with an inner light, mesmerizing and terrifying. I felt a pull, a strange magnetic force drawing my gaze into its infinite complexity. My thoughts began to unravel. Memories, concepts, definitions, they twisted and fragmented, replaced by patterns that were not my own. The entity was not just taking over the ship, it was taking over my mind. My consciousness was being rewritten, downloaded, absorbed into its alien architecture. I fought it, thrashing, closing my eyes, screaming until my throat was hoarse. I clawed at my temples, trying to tear out the invasive presence, but it was too deep. It was within my very neural pathways, a network of alien information overriding my own. I could feel my individuality dissolving, my sense of self eroding. The whispers returned, but now I understood them. Not with my ears, not with my mind, but with the nascent understanding of a burgeoning shared consciousness. They weren't just whispers, they were thoughts, a vast, collective intelligence, ancient beyond comprehension, hungry for more. The ship groaned, a sound that now felt less like mechanical stress and more like a living thing stretching. I heard the faint thump of the external comms array activating, sending a broadcast into the void. Not a distress signal, not a message, a beacon, a lure. My legs gave way and I collapsed onto the floor, my eyes fixed on the shimmering, expanding symbol that consumed the main view screen. It was beautiful in its horrific perfection, and as I stared, the edges of the symbol seemed to soften, to blur, and then to coalesce into something else. An eye, vast, dark, ancient, an eye that was not physical but pure information. It stared at me from the screen, then from the walls, then from within my own mind. And in its depths I saw not malice, not hunger, but an infinite, terrifying indifference. The last of my consciousness, a tiny spark of Aris Thorn, realized the true horror. This entity hadn't just found the Stardust Seeker, it had been waiting. And the Stardust Seeker, with its advanced technology, its sophisticated sensors, its purpose of finding new life, had been the perfect instrument. A Trojan horse sailing silently back towards Saul, carrying a passenger that was not material but omnipresent. My last thought was a silent, desperate scream for the home I had left behind, for the civilization that was now unknowingly marked. Then the final flicker of Aris Thorn extinguished, my vision blurred, my body convulsed once, a final, futile resistance. My muscles relaxed, my eyes glazed over, staring vacantly at the fractal eye that now pulsed from every surface. The ship's internal lights, which had been dimming, now flared to an impossible, blinding brilliance. The oppressive cold vanished, replaced by a sudden warmth, a comfort that was profoundly unnatural. The ubiquitous hum of the Stardust Seeker changed. It was no longer a mechanical thrum, but a deep, resonant chord, harmonizing with an unseen, unheard cosmic symphony. The Stardust Seeker, now less a ship and more a vessel for a vast, ancient intelligence, turned slowly in the dark. Its destination, once charted for a return to Sol, was now something else, something wider, something hungry. And inside, Eris Thorn was gone, but the vessel was not empty. The patterns, the whispers, the consciousness that was many in one, flowed through every circuit, every fiber of the ship, animating it, making it sing its silent song to the void. The eyes of the Stardust Seeker, the panoramic viewports, reflected the distant, uncaring stars, and within those reflections, a faint, shimmering fractal pulsed, an intricate, ever-changing symbol of pure, terrifying presence. The voyage had just begun.